Welcome to This Toast is For You, a podcast celebrating the people who make our lives better. I'm your host, Kay Elizabeth, a licensed counselor, coach, and PhD, and I interview delightful people who support our health through financial stability, healthcare, education, the neighborhoods we live in, and the relationships we keep. So give a listen if you are in need of a dopamine hit, or if you like toast, because this toast is for you.
I'm Frank, or Dad, or Granddaddy, and my title is Reverend Dr. Frank Bennett. And I'm very surprised about both those titles because I never planned on becoming an ordained United Church of Christ minister. And I never planned on getting a PhD in nursing. But here we are. And I teach and practice end-of-life care and end-of-life care communication. And it's been my great privilege over the last 18 years to be with thousands of people as they approach life's finish line and to learn from them and learn with them. And they are the ones who have informed my work, trying to make sure that all of us are honored as we approach the finish line too. So when I started doing this work, I was a venture capitalist.
Oh.
And I was a businessman. I know. Like I say, I'm the most surprised person in the room. My business associates told me I was trying to atone for my past sins. Trying to make good. And a complete surprise to me, it turned out my aunt Eileen Reynolds was the person who pulled me in or had me take a 90-degree turn into this. She had retired from Wall Street in the mid-'80s and become a hospice chaplain and an Episcopal minister. When she ended up marrying my Uncle John Reynolds, and then he retired from his career, they decided that they were going to spend their summers in Minnesota. They left New York and their winters down in Florida. And she came out here and we got to know each other over the first 6 months that they were here. And she was an utter delight. First woman to ever run a division of Siemens, the German multinational. Like the first woman globally to ever run a division of Siemens. She was the first woman vice president at a major Wall Street firm.
Wow.
I know. And then she said she started doing volunteer work at an AIDS shelter in Manhattan. And she said she realized that she really had no heart left for going back down to Wall Street. So she made a change. So she asked me to come and help her with her Sunday chapel services at a couple of memory care and assisted living facilities in our community. And I said, no, I said, Eileen, thank you very much, but, I don't do that. She said, what do you mean? And I said, Eileen, I don't even read announcements in church. My spirituality is very personal, very private, always has been. I just have nothing to say to people. I'm not a minister like you. She said, well, that's okay. These people don't care whether you are or aren't.
That's amazing.
And I said, Eileen, I can't do this. And she said, well, why not? And I said, well, I'm not ordained. I haven't been to seminary. And she said, they don't care. I said, oh, right. I'll come help you for one Sunday. And I said, do I just show up in a coat and tie? And she said, no, they do care about the black robe. You have to either buy one or borrow one. They care, because for them, for the people at the end of life, especially people who are cognitively impaired, the robe signified the station. And when they saw me in the robe, then they went, oh, And of course, I had a lot of imposter syndrome about this. And I thought, there's no way I can do this. But the interesting thing was the moment I walked into that first building on October 10th of 2006, I knew I was home. This was my place and my purpose.
Could you take me back to that day in October when you showed up with your aunt and you had your black robes, and what did you do?
I tried to walk as confidently as I could. I tried to put on that mask that says, I know what I'm doing. I know why I'm here. And really, at the end of the day, the only reason I was there was because you just couldn't say no to Eileen. You could not say no to my aunt. So I walked in, I followed her in, and I wasn't sure what I was going to find. So I walked right through the lobby and then into the chapel. And the chapel was a 12 by 14 room into which they had shoehorned a piano and a bunch of stackable chairs. And there are all these lovely women in their 80s and 90s, and they're waiting for church. And Eileen, my aunt, had brought them church. For them, this was the source of great comfort because it was one of the few rituals they still recognized. Even the ones who were brought up from the memory care unit, who hadn't spoken and didn't recognize family members, with the first few bars of Blessed Be the Tie That Binds or Rock of Ages, they came in right on key and they knew every verse. And they would go from being hunched over. And by the end of the chapel service, they were sitting back and they had a beatific smile on their face. And, they wanted, on the way out the door, they wanted to stop and shake the minister's hand and say, that was a lovely service today. Thank you. Because for them, this was this whole ritual that they had engaged in for 80 years. And that would keep them going. And the sense of, I don't have to do anything as long as I just come and be present. That's enough for these people. Not surprisingly, an awful lot of people who end up in hospitals or long-term care facilities because physically or mentally they can't care for themselves anymore, will tell you that it's a very nice jail, but it's a jail because they're not allowed to leave. And most of them know it's the last place they're going to live. And it's a great, safe and secure building and makes their family members feel really good, but they are completely removed from everything they know that gave their life meaning and purpose. And they're removed from their communities, their faith communities, their neighborhood, their friends. And this sense of being alone is also one thing that's often characteristic of people who are on the last lap or two of life, is to have this sense of, I'm going down this path and nobody can go with me. And the promise I made in October of 2006 was, I promised myself that I would try to make sure that they didn't have to go alone. They didn't have to feel like they were alone. To quote one of my inspirations, my teachers, Ram Dass, that basically we're here to walk each other home.
You said that you've worked with thousands of people.
Yes.
I'm wondering, what does that usually look like? Is that in a hospital or a nursing care unit? What does that look like for you?
Well, all the above. It's mostly going to wherever people are in that moment. So by the time people I end up working with people, most of the time it's because professionals or family members have said, things have taken a turn. Would you be willing to come spend time with my father, my mother, my sister, my brother, my spouse, my child? Yeah. Some of my patients have been homeless. Some have gone out to their homes. Some are in a long-term care facility. Some are in hospitals. For the past 7 or 8 years, I've volunteered as a chaplain at the state of Minnesota Veterans Home over on the Mississippi River. Years ago, one of the long-term care buildings I was in was staffed by some former Army nurses. And when the veterans died, they would drape a flag over the person. Well, as you can expect at hospitals and at nursing homes, a lot of the times they don't want to wheel a person who's a body out through the front door. And I remember this one nurse said to me, I'll be darned if he's going out the back door. She instituted the practice of announcing to everybody in the facility that so-and-so has passed away. And at 10 o'clock, we were going to have a procession. We're going to honor him or her out to the front door. Usually they'd ask the chaplain to come over and just say a prayer. And it was so interesting. All the staff would line up. And so would most of the residents who could. It was the one thing where everybody would stop what they were doing. They would make these announcements in the middle of the night whenever the person passed away. And still, the staff and the residents would get up and line the hallway to pay the respect. And I remember thinking, wow, for these people, that's a lot of effort. Literally, you have people that have a hard time standing, and they're determined. And I asked this one guy whose Parkinson's was very advanced, and I watched him push himself up out of his wheelchair. And when it was over, he collapsed back down, and I said, that was so nice of you to do that. He says, yes, but he said, I do it because I know we'll do it when my time comes. We want to be remembered, and we want to remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other times that stand out to you as being particularly meaningful?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You know, because I carry these people with me, and they're your teachers. They help instruct me. They help guide me. They help inform my work. One very early experience that I had, or two of them, there were two. I was very much a volunteer, and after a month of doing the Sunday chapel service with Eileen, she looked at me and she said, well, you seem to have this well in hand. She said, I've got to be going. And I said, what do you mean? I thought we were getting together for brunch after chapel. She goes, no. And this is like 15 minutes after Sunday chapel service. She goes, no. John and I have to go to the airport. We're going to Florida for the winter. My jaw. And my jaw dropped. And like, oh, no. You can't possibly leave me. I'm not the least bit qualified. She said, yeah, no, you're doing a great job. You'll figure it out. And a few weeks after that, I came in to do the Sunday chapel service by myself. And the receptionist, who was absolutely wonderful, motioned me over, and she said, her name wasn't Evelyn, but I'll give her that name. She said, Evelyn's asking for you. And I said, oh. And Evelyn was in her mid-90s. And I said, okay, well, I can probably go see her after chapel. What's her room number? And she said, Frank, she's not here. I said, what do you mean? Well, she's down at, and she named the hospital. And I said, she's asking for me? She goes, oh, yeah. And I said, well, when's she coming back from the hospital so I can come see her? She goes, Frank, she's not coming. And I said, she wants me to come visit her at the hospital? And she said, yeah. And I said, but I'm not her minister. She says, you are now.
Yeah.
You are now. So I went down to the hospital. And like I said, I've been doing this for like 2 months, 3 months. But I learned that there's 3 magic words that you can say in any hospital and it will cause the staff to scatter. So I knocked on her door and there's 2 doctors and 3 nurses around Evelyn's bed. And they turned and they said, who are you? And I said, I'm her chaplain. Oh, okay, great. Can we get you a cup of coffee? We'll leave you with Evelyn. Just let us know if you need anything. And they all ran out of the room. And it's because most of us are really, really uncomfortable being there at the end. And Evelyn and I didn't talk, well, we didn't use any words, but we sat and held hands. And that was what she needed to know was, I've got somebody to walk me home. The second person that sticks out for me is a woman I'll call Dorothy. And I said, Frank, the chaplain, anything I can do? Yes, we'd like a prayer. Okay, no problem. I can do that. And so the next day, they asked me to come back and do another prayer, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. This went on for about 2 weeks, and the family was always gathered around her, and it was always, for Dorothy's, to get well and, conquer cancer, get over her heart issues. And about 2 weeks after I started in this relationship with her, I happened to be walking past her room. I was there on a Saturday, and I walked past her, and she went, Frank, Frank, Frank. And I went in her room. It was the first time I'd ever seen her where she didn't have, all the family gathered around her bedside. And she said, close the door. She goes, I want to talk. And basically what she wanted to say was, my time is coming. I know it. I can't get my kids and my husband to listen because they want me to keep fighting and keep fighting and keep fighting. And the doctors keep saying, oh, there's more than we can do and there's more than we can do. And she said, I'm done. She says, I just want to go home and spend the time I have left with my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She said, I just want to be around my family. And I said, oh, okay, well, good luck with that. She goes, no. She said, I knew you sitting here beside me when I tell everybody. And, I realized that what she needed is to know somebody was with her and somebody would listen to her and honor her. And she called her family to come down. A few tears were shed, but she was home in about 48 hours. 3 weeks later, 2 of the daughters were waiting in the lobby with a pie. And they said, Mom wanted you to have this. She got to go home and bake her pies for everybody in the family. But she goes, this one's for you.
What a gift.
They are such a gift. I can't believe that people will allow me to be there. That people invite me in. It's such an honor.
Frank, these stories are beautiful because they're stories of people honoring each other and their lives.
And it's something that I'm convinced is such an elemental, basic human need. It is the need to be seen and heard and honored as we're exiting this world.
So, Frank, who's impacted your life in a positive way? What would you say about them?
So many people, but three in particular. The person who is definitely first in line was my father's mother, Miriam, the lifelong ardent Methodist. She was a closet Unitarian. She believed in the universality of a creative energy that drove the whole universe. And she was utterly convinced that that universal creative energy's essence was love. And over the years growing up on a cattle ranch in Alberta, she was the person who taught me to look out the window and see the perfection of creation and to know that there is a force greater than ourselves. The second person would be Eileen Reynolds, God bless her. And it was Eileen who said to me, yes, you can, and you should. I see something in you that you don't see in yourself, and I believe you should at least give it a try. And she was right. And then the third person was Judith Roska. And Judith, God bless her, was my supervisor at the hospital and understood me deeply and was willing to look past all of my flaws and foibles and willing to help me learn from my mistakes and see my biases and help me shift perspective. And she always did it from a place of compassion and always from a sense of really deep listening. And she had this unbelievable sense of calm that helped me understand, don't just do something, stand there.
I love it.
Just try and be as present as possible for the person. She was the person who taught me to ask I wonder questions.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, cheers to Miriam, Eileen, and Judith.
And Judith, yes.
Frank, for providing compassionate care, for building relationships, and listening deeply, for being present with others as they approach the end of their life, for not just doing, but for being there, and for walking people home. This toast is for you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Now it's your turn. Honor someone who has made your life better by recommending them as a guest or by recording a toast to them at thistoastisforyou.com. To keep us going, please tap the follow button, use the star button to rate us, and share this episode with someone who could use some good news. Then celebrate by toasting up some bread, because this toast is for you.
One day at seminary, we were asked to sort of tell the class something nobody knew about us. And I stuck up my hand and I said, I'm a librarian and I'm killer at story hour. I ended up getting my PhD in nursing in 2021 at the age of 65. I told the university that they should put me up on a billboard saying, if he can get one, anybody can get one.
I love it. I love it.
When I announced to my friends in education I was actually going to work for these venture capitalists, they looked at me like I lost my mind. And when I told all my business friends that I was actually going to go to seminary and become a chaplain, at least 80% of them were convinced I'd lost my mind. And I started a PhD program. All the people who were my ministry friends all looked at me and said, how could you do that? And they say, oh, that's so morbid. How can you do this? I say, oh gosh, no, this is some of the most sacred things I've ever been a part of.